Bum, bum, bum. It's time for some more Formula One. This music! Oh my god. Oh my god. Okay, is that done? Okay, so today it will be some more Autosport. Hopefully the take on Australia isn't bad. Like their Max Verstappen move. Let's see. And then we have F1 Nation podcast review of Australia and the Max move. That's probably also a lot of copion and yeah. Let's see. Do this. Yeah, and let's. And like I said yesterday, we will be mining out the wall that we will soon see. That wall. That this will be mined. Or the. I mean, it looked like it's a lot, but it's just. Oh well, it's kind of a lot. But it. So, like you see this, it will look the same here. And then we have, here's more mined out, but this will also look like, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 across. Here and here. And while we're doing this, let's see with the Autosport and then F1 Nation podcast. And then maybe the race. They had something about McLaren. But let's start with this. And like always, sound is needed. Shit.
Formula One makes the trip down under as all the teams head to Albert Park for round 3 of the championship. And after a relatively straightforward first couple of races for Max Verstappen anyway, as a neutral we're going to be hoping for a little bit more racing magic. Well, I'm Bryn Lucas, and joining me to discuss everything Australia and the Australian Grand Prix is John Noble and Alex Kalinauckas. Gents, welcome. First of all, Alex, it's been a while since I last saw you, it seems.
Has, yes. Obviously been out to the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, getting back in the swing of... I always find the sort of difference between covering testing and covering racing. It actually makes for a nice change of pace. Racing, the race weekends are slightly more leisurely, even though they're incredibly hard work, if that makes any sense at all.
It certainly does. And John, I think the last time I saw you, you were leaning against something. Was that Bahrain or was that Saudi? I've lost track.
I think it was Saudi Sunday night. I was battling those mosquitoes down by the seafront, which hadn't been there at all all weekend. So I think they liked the computer screen outside, and became a bit of an attraction for them on the Saturday night.
Similar surroundings, but not quite as many mosquitoes this time, thankfully. Now, listen, gents, let's get talking about Australia, because we've had two, as I said at the top, fairly easy races if you're Max Verstappen, but for the rest of the teams, they're going to be trying to...
What do you mean, if you're a Max Verstappen fan? Do you mean you can only like this if you're a Max Verstappen fan? Lies, I would say.
Chase the pack down and maybe get a podium if they've not had one yet this season. But John, what are the different characteristics of Albert Park over the last couple of races that we've seen so far?
Yeah, it's the third track, and they're all quite different actually. Melbourne's Albert Park's a street circuit, but not in your kind of Monaco super tight street circuit characteristic. There's a decent mixture actually. You've got some really high speed sections, some tight corners, medium speed corners. But I think most critically as well, it's a track surface that's different to the first two. So Bahrain had, maybe similar range of corners, but the track surface there is very unique, very abrasive, very high degradation. Really punishes the tyres. So very different kind of challenge to what's needed in Melbourne. Melbourne, they're bringing the C5, the softest tyre of their range, to try to spice things up a little bit. So I think we may well get, even though it's a bit of a unique track and it's not like a kind of Barcelona or Suzuka, your traditional aerodynamic bias circuit, we should get a pretty decent picture of relative performance. And
I mean, Mercedes can be how bad as possible. People will still, like, remember this guy, will still have Copion on. Mercedes will be good.
Hopefully,
just wait.
A much clearer picture of where things are stacking up, and just how big is that Red Bull advantage? Is it 2-3 tenths in qualifying and bigger in the races, or are things really, really close? And Ferrari, perhaps nudging there, and a Mercedes, do they have something in the bag that we have?
Oh my god! Yes. Back to Copion Mercedes. Why is so Copion about Mercedes? Is he a British fan? Oh my god, what do you call them? British biased?
Haven't seen yet because of the cooling issues in Bahrain.
Yeah, we haven't seen the glorious Mercedes car at its fullest. We just seen a sneak peek of their performance.
This kind of
Red Bull performance isn't close enough to Mercedes.
När du hör mig räkna till 3 vill jag att du
and
går
some
tillbaka i
airtime that
minnet.
will be
weird
gone.
high-speed problem they had in Saudi.
Alex, from your point of view, Australia, what are you hoping? I'm sure I'm going to get a bit more drama from you, but what are you hoping that you're going to see out there in Albert Park?
Yeah, always hoping for a bit more drama. I wouldn't be a very good journalist if I didn't have that sort of interest. But yeah, I think mainly just it's the usual question: can anyone challenge Red Bull? And I think
Ferrari, yes.
Yeah, I think Ferrari, you've got to say, surely be the pick to be the sort of second favourite or the closest challenger, because of what we've seen so far of the season, it does seem to have made positive progress sort of in the wake of Red Bull's own, but also like Ferrari historically goes really well here. I think there's a lot to be said for that sort of that mythical sort of extra couple of tenths that a supportive crowd can produce for a team, and that's definitely the case for Melbourne. I was one of our former colleagues who's Australian, lives out there, telling us that big support for Ferrari in Melbourne because of sort of the roots of the Italian immigration there in previous times. But yeah, so Ferrari, big sort of a boost there, but also just they seem to be able to gel with that track quite nicely. Like if we think back to 2022, Charles Leclerc, Ferrari completely destroyed the Red Bull package. I mean, how often have we said that since? Obviously, that's testament to the incredible work that Red Bull have done. But it does show you that, you know, things can happen there if that team gets everything right. And also, Red Bull historically hasn't got things perfect. I think if we think even back to last year, okay, it'll be remembered as another, you know, pretty solid Max Verstappen win once he got back past the Mercedes cars through all those red flags and things like that. But the team was struggling quite a lot with the tyres and the braking and things like that. You saw Sergio Perez, you know, off the track quite regularly in FP3, the qualifying issues, and even Verstappen.
Okay, Perez doesn't. How we said that. He was really unlucky the whole season.
Himself late in the race had an off, so it's the sort of unusual track because of everything that John covered. Plus the Melbourne weather, we know that at the moment it's about 30 degrees. We're recording this quite early in the week ahead of the race, but it's going to drop about 10 degrees by the time the actual race weekend comes around. Could rain, things like that. It's the sort of thing. It's the sort of event that could potentially knock Red Bull off its perch. And add to that, you've got the risk of safety cars. We saw Sebastian Vettel sort of upending the Mercedes dominance here in 2018 by getting the timing right around the virtual safety car. Mercedes slightly messing up. So things can happen, but I've been hoping
things can happen. Yes,
that things can happen in the Bahrain Grand Prix and the Jeddah Grand Prix, and they haven't. So yeah, one of those ones where again we'll be hoping for a lot, potentially not getting very much.
You'll be sitting there with your popcorn at 4 a.m. Fingers crossed that some drama happens as you're watching. Now, John, for yourself, looking at this one, I mean, Alex has said that he's hoping for a bit more drama. I'm sure you are as well. But there seems to be a lot still going on at Red Bull, and this story is still rumbling on. This one that's been going on for weeks and weeks and weeks. Is that going to form any part of a distraction, or do you think that Red Bull are now kind of beyond that distraction in this week leading up to the Grand Prix?
Oh, let's see. Will Red Bull have a problem because of the Red Bull's doomsday?
I think there's a interesting dynamic at Red Bull. I think, and I spoke to their technical director Pierre Vachin.
Oh my God! Just answer the question. Why do you, man? The
Saudi
fuck
Arabia,
you doing?
Chewing the fat about all that's going on, and I think there's basically the team. There's a line between the paddock and the garage that the second they cross over the threshold into the garage, they isolate themselves from all that's going on. Focuses on performance, and they've done a brilliant job for all the potential for what's going on to affect them or impact them. They've been flawless on track, and they've made the first two races look like a drive around a Sunday afternoon drive, basically, even though both races were on Saturdays. But in terms of paddock stuff, it has to be a distraction. That endless media speculation was with the talk of Bahrain, it was the talk of Saudi Arabia. Things are developing. There's talk of the female employee appealing, the FIA involved. There's what's going on with Max's contract, investigation into leaks. So this is a situation.
Wait. So nothing proven to be true yet. Nice.
Died down. The power
Journalist.
battle, what's really going on inside.
Speculation day after day.
Tide side of the company. Helmut Marko, Christian Horner, Max Verstappen, Jos Verstappen. This is a soap opera that hasn't reached its end yet.
In my eyes, I don't know. Did it really start then? I think nothing.
And I'm sure. We get this in Formula One, that the teams go away, disappear to factories, things calm down and gets all very settled. And you throw everyone into a confined paddock, throw all the journalists into the mix, and the gossip starts revving up.
Yeah, Jos Verstappen is really good at that. Journalist is really good at that also. I wonder why.
And I'm sure it'll all explode nicely again in Melbourne on Thursday.
Yeah, but it's already started revving up.
Yeah,
hasn't
people
it?
like you are ruin the fun, and then you complain about it. That all the stuff you talk about is the only stuff you talk about. Man, your life must be so sad when you hate the stuff you only do.
Let's talk. I love that. I love puns. I love a pun, John. Thanks very much for slipping that one in. Now, Alex mentions if anyone is going to really start to rival Red Bull, he's already put his money on Ferrari by the sound of it. But I'll come back to you in a second, Alex, on that one. But John, who do you think outside of Red Bull, are we assuming that it's going to be a Red Bull 1-2 with Max leading the way, or do you think some other team, some other driver might get in the mix? Who's your firm favourite on the outside odds?
Well, I think, as Alex says, Ferrari have to be, the ones that look most likely to topple them. But I think they need to nail that qualifying lap, and they need to get ahead of Max on lap 1, basically. I think Max has understood, almost a repeat of how Sebastian Vettel dominated those championships when he was winning, that you get pole position, you break DRS on lap 1, on lap 1 now, it was by lap 2 then, and then you're clear because your rivals can't push because the tyres don't last and overheat. And it becomes a compounding problem. So they need to get ahead of Max in qualifying. I think Ferrari potentially have the potential to do it, but they'll be missing.
Wait, not Mercedes?
10-4-2-10. But that's the sort of thing that can come with upgrades, can come with nailing qualifying laps. So it's there. The intriguing one is Mercedes, that we don't really know where.
Stop it! Why this fucking Mercedes stuff? Oh my God.
The intriguing one is Mercedes, that we don't.
Why is that? I mean, I feel more interesting to see where Visa, Cash App, RB, Formula 1 team and Williams are than Mercedes. But someone in this Autosport really want to know how Mercedes will do in this race.
Don't really know where they stack up. They looked really, really quick in Bahrain. Potentially
they did.
Ferrari. George Russell got past Charles Leclerc early on, even though Leclerc was suffering from brakes, but then backed off because of the cooling issue. And Saudi, they were wrecked by this high-speed problem. Melbourne's not as high a speed as Saudi Arabia, but there is some high-speed sections, and it does rely on driver confidence. So there'll be some interest to see how quick they can get on top of it. I understand they're going back to an old floor design that they had in testing, which they were more comfortable with. So they're trying to get to the bottom of what's gone wrong, what's happened with upgrades. Is there something mysterious going on with this car? So a lot of work for them on Friday. Potentially they find the answer
a lot of work.
It gets unlocked, because everywhere else, low speed, medium speed, straight line, they're quicker than last year. It's this high speed performance is disguising the real progress the team has made.
Alex, I'm going to ask you to pick a team.
Yeah. Is it that sad when the stuff you made is disguised with shit stuff when everyone says you have done something good?
Isn't Ferrari?
It's just a lucky
I'm
life.
ask you to pick a team that isn't Red Bull, and I'm just gonna plant a little Piastri seed in here, because he's the local lad. It would be great for an Australian to be somewhere near the top end, wouldn't it? Does he have any chance? I mean, who are you going to say would be on the podium outside of a Red Bull and maybe not a Ferrari?
Oh, I'm glad you said the word podium there, because no, he doesn't have a chance to win the race given how good Red Bull is. But I mean, again, we talked about that. The energy you can, the organisations can get from specific races. Same applies to the drivers as well. And Oscar Piastri, very much a local boy. I was lucky enough to go to his 21st birthday down the road in near Brighton Beach, near Albert Park. What was that, 2022? Kindly organised by the Alpine team, although the sort of guests of honour that were supposed to speak to Piastri never turned up. And he was out of that team a little while later in that big contract saga, but there we go. I think it's more a case of McLaren's. I think if any of the teams are sort of genuine disappointments in terms of the front runners at this stage, you've probably got to say it's McLaren right now, because Aston Martin kind of where everyone sort of expected them to be, considering it was sort of other teams underperforming that made them look particularly good at the start of last year. McLaren, I think there was this sort of suggestion, they were like, we know we've made this car faster than what we ended 2023 with, but maybe things haven't quite gelled for them in the way that they were hoping. But that said, it's less of a Bahrain situation where it's a track that they've historically gone not so good at. It's just the last couple of years, obviously, the car just hasn't been potentially even anything like a podium challenger. Whereas if things go right for McLaren and things go right for Piastri, then they do have a hope. But yeah, I think McLaren probably looking further on towards Japan and the sort of the ground where they were so superb there last year to definitely be sort of really hopeful of being in the fight, because it's just so close. Like John talked about Ferrari and the tyres and things not going quite right and missing pole positions in Bahrain and potentially Jeddah as well. I mean, if any driver gets things even slightly wrong, then they could be looking at losing 2 or 3, even 4 places on the grid. So it's the sort of thing where if Oscar Piastri hooks everything up, he could end up starting 3rd, 2nd, even. Who knows what Sergio Perez is going to do? Like it's such fine margins behind Verstappen, so that does make things sort of.
In the qualifying, yes. In the race, no. Stop pretending that. Wow, if you're just qualifying before Max, then you will more likely win the race. I mean, yes, but really, do you really think because Max doesn't start P1 he will not win?
Both equally raising hopes and expectations, and also that just shows you what jeopardy there is for everyone at the moment.
Yeah, I know that Phil Clearon wrote.
Not for the Red Bull, but for maybe getting who gets the P3, who gets the last podium.
An article on Autosport.com about McLaren bringing a serious upgrade, looking at maybe Miami or Imola, sort of around 6 or 7, something like that. So
then I would say between Ferrari and McLaren, that's true. Everything that he said is true. But when you mention Red Bull, it doesn't matter where you start. Red Bull will still win if they doesn't crash out or something.
Let's keep our eyes on that one. But it would be good for the
or a really unlucky safety car,
wouldn't it, to have an Australian driver that they can really cheer for?
But even then, how they can manage the tyres is, I mean, they will probably never be at just a problem because they just wait until the safety car is come out or after everyone have already done their pit stop.
Not quite sure what Daniel Ricciardo is going to come up with. We'll come to him in a little bit, I'm sure. John, quickly, let's talk about Ferrari and Carlos Sainz returning. He's expected to return anyway. Any news on him post-surgery?
I think, as far as we understand, progress has been fine. We saw Carlos return to the paddock in Saudi Arabia on the Saturday. You know, didn't look as bouncy and upbeat as he normally would be, because obviously going through surgery is not the work at the moment. But weeks recovery at home, travel to Australia. I think the team's anticipating he should be all fine for the race weekends. In terms of reserves, Ollie Behrman's there on Formula 2 duty. They'll keep him, you know, have him available if they need him. But I think from both Ollie Behrman's F2 championship hopes and Ferrari's hopes, they'll hope that Sainz is fighting fit, ready to go, and hopefully able to back it up and knock those Red Bulls off the front row.
Är ni redo? För våren på TV4 Play som är fullspäckad med sport, film.
No. We shall have to wait and see all this as we always do. Let's just jump to Mercedes very quickly. We have touched on it a little bit.
Yeah, we need to get in some Mercedes stuff. How could we? I mean, here we have Alpine, we have no Williams or Visa Cash Up RB from the one team. Okay, so
what do we think about them and their car? They're
McLaren and Ferrari will be better than Mercedes.
Looking to experiment, apparently, Albert Park, John.
Yeah, it's trying to get to the bottom of this high-speed problem. They've been a bit baffled by it. In Bahrain testing, the car seemed perfectly fine, all understandable. Then a few alarm bells were ringing in Bahrain, but wasn't too bad. But the high-speed sections of Jeddah, you know, some of the highest speed corners we get of the season, the car felt terrible. The drivers had no confidence. There was a bit of bouncing, but not much more extreme than others. But there's just a lack of confidence and downforce, and something happening at the rear of the car that's holding the drivers back. They haven't got the confidence to push, and they were losing all their time in this area of the track. The team's slightly baffled. The data it's getting from simulation and wind tunnel saying the car should be delivering this downforce at this speed isn't being replicated on track. So there's been tremendous activity at the factory, all hands on deck.
Tremendous. I mean, it feels like they have done that 3 years now. When will they learn? When will they succeed to actually do a good car? Can you tell me that story? Than doing all this copium that they are making progress.
Understand what is the issue, what is happening to the car at high speed, what's causing this phenomenon, and they'll be working through it on Friday, because Melbourne does have some high speed corners, and if the drivers are losing 1/10 or 2/10, as Alex says, that's the difference between potentially, you know, battling with the Red Bulls and Ferraris or being dropped into that chasing pack.
Or not. Could they just, I mean, in qualifying, there will be fight the other people, but then in the race, no.
Alex, last year, 2023, was the first 3 red flag race that we had in Formula 1. What can we expect from Albert Park, from the Australian Grand Prix, if it's a cleaner race?
Yeah, I think obviously you don't know what's going to be
thrown up
by the potential for safety cars and things like that. We'll come to that in a little bit, but I think assuming it runs green flag from start to finish, it'll be a one stopper, as John mentioned. The C5s, as I refer to my notes here over my shoulder. C5 for the first time being unleashed by Pirelli. I suspect that will be much more of a qualifying only tyre. I think probably some of the teams will try and evaluate that during the sort of long runs you typically see in FP2, but I think wouldn't be that much of a shock for it to be, you know, start on the mediums, go on to the hard, which is the C3 tyre that they just run all the time. They have so much data on that, nice and comfortable for everyone. The only thing that I would say is that this track is much more about thermal degradation rather than wear, so it might be interesting if some teams think that they and their drivers can hook it up, get that soft into a window, potentially gain a little bit at the start, then maybe it might be something that they could consider. Either sort of we talk about gambles in Formula 1. It's more of a, you know, sort of a calculated risk, I suppose, than just generally sort of throwing everything at it. But the other point that, as I said, will come back to the safety cars. That could be a real serious reason to try something different at the start, because things do happen here. I mean, we saw Charles Leclerc in the gravel after 3 corners last year. All those red.
That was a sad start. Seeing Leclerc out of the race, man, not fun.
Flags. It can be a trap because it is so high speed and it is technically a street circuit. So it's pretty. I'd describe it as brutal in a way. Like if you get it slightly wrong here, Alex Albon, what was it? Went over the curbs a little, like slightly too much during the race.
I would say every race sounds like it's brutal when people talk.
Heated the rear tyres, next corner, bang, he's in the wall, and it's a red flag. And that obviously changed things massively for George Russell, who's leading the race at the time last year. So, again, this is a race where things can change very, very quickly. I think we haven't really seen a big sort of strategy test or a test where teams have got to make the calls under pressure, other than the sort of, you know, McLaren and Mercedes leaving Norris and Hamilton out during that safety car stop last time out in Jeddah. So, yeah, again, it's sort of the thing where maybe something exciting and interesting will happen, but at this stage, we just don't know yet.
I think sometimes we have to look a little bit further back in the pack, and I'm going to come to you, John, and talk about Alpine, because after Saudi Arabia, Esteban Ocon said that they felt that they could challenge for 10th place. But in your opinion, how far off is this French team from being the 10th quickest come the end of a race?
Yeah, quite a long way, I think. I think from what we've seen from the first two races, the grid's split into two packs. You've got the top five, which is Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, Aston Martin, which were all potentially quite close. We don't yet know how good Aston's race pace is, because in Bahrain they were a bit off, Saudi they were better. So Aston are either in that pack or at the back of it. Then the rest are all much for muchness in this kind of Class B section, but Alpine at the moment seem quite pegged to the back. We had expected Haas to be right at the back, but their cars not proved to be too bad. They made a lot of progress, tyre degradation, and thanks to Kevin Magnussen, you know, getting his elbows out and holding everyone up with a bit of strategy that has annoyed everyone.
Okay, cheating. Just say what it is. Strategy by cheating. Just say
teams in Saudi, Nico Hülkenberg got that point. It was Haas team boss Ayo Komatsu who said in Bahrain, basically the way the grid split up, basically the driver that can get ahead of Lance Stroll in the race basically will score a point, and it seems that's what
Lance Stroll. Why did he mention Lance Stroll like just like that? If you like, he said the only driver in the top teams that will make a mistake. So what
we're going to get in that fight for six. So amazingly, Haas are currently sixth in the Constructors' Championship with 1 point.
Wow, yeah, amazingly. For where people thought they were, how the other teams could be better, maybe you can amazingly say they were, but no.
Which is quite remarkable, really. So I think it could be a season where there's going to be a really, really intense battle between five teams to score 1 point at a race. And at the moment, Alpine's car's overweight, doesn't handle especially well, lacks traction, doesn't have very good
everything is
downforce, and I think it's quite a long road back to be able to make progress on the teams in front, who themselves will be making progress. So they're not chasing a stationary target. They need to make more progress than the cars in front. So I don't think it's going to be a short-term fix for Alpine.
The
on
summer
that point
fix.
About different leagues within the championship, how many do you think it is? Do you think it's a top five and a bottom five, or do you think there's a top three and then a middle three? And you know, how would you split it up if you were to say how many leagues there are within the league? Does that make any sense?
Red Bull and Ferrari is on its own. Then we have Ferrari, McLaren. Oh no. Red Bull and Ferrari. Red Bull on its own, Ferrari just behind. McLaren and Mercedes together, and then Aston Martin. Then I would say Visa, Cash App and Williams for now. If Alpine doesn't get better.
It does, yeah, maybe packs within the league, but yeah, I think
packs within. All right.
I think it's three, isn't it? I think it's Red Bull out in front, everyone else in the sort of Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, Aston fight. And then as John says, there is that other pack that's adrift at the bottom. And I think the drivers certainly feel that. Joe Granu talking about that in Jeddah, that it does feel more sort of pronounced than it did last year. And I mean, when you're considering, okay, if we put what I've just described as the first two packs there together, that adds up to 5 teams. Without things going wrong, and unless it's a driver error like we saw from Lance Stroll in Saudi Arabia, the mechanical issues just don't really happen that much. I mean, they do it at Alpine because everything seems to be going wrong for that team at the moment, but it's just not like it was before, where you back in the sort of 90s, where you had that jeopardy. Teams are just, by being forced to do it by regulation, they have improved so much on reliability that it means the sort of more random results are less likely. So extraordinary stat at the moment that you can be 6th with 1 point, and potentially it just puts a premium on those drivers being absolutely perfect.
So maybe Strasser leaves
RB, Haas, Williams, Alpine. It just shows you how they've really, even more than normal, got to be perfect to make things work out this year.
Well, let's go back to tyres. Alex, you mentioned tyres earlier on, so I'm going to come to you on this one. Now, recently, Formula 1 announced that they've scrapped the decision to move from the 18-inch to 16-inch rims for 2026. What can you tell us about all this story? What's the impact going to be on the teams as well?
Yeah, once again, going to very much refer to my notes for the answer to this question. But I think the idea, obviously, there's a lot of talk at the moment about how heavy and cumbersome and just generally massive these new cars are, the current cars are, because we're really halfway of the current era. 2026 is actually not that far away now, so there's lots of chat about what can be done to make things maybe a bit more nimble. Obviously the massive advancement in the safety structures and things like that have come at a weight cost. That's just not going to go away, because frankly I'd rather see a big heavy Formula 1 car than see a driver die in it. I don't think that's particularly controversial.
Wait, what did he say?
Rather see a big heavy Formula 1 car than see a driver die in it. I don't think that's particularly controversial. That's definitely the way to be. But the idea was potentially there could be
I mean, if you make a car Yeah, I would say I don't like the big cars, but because, I mean, sure, safety make the cars somewhat bigger, but is that really just a big problem to make a car smaller and equally safety or safe? Is it just impossible to make the car safe smaller?
A significant weight saving by moving the tyres to 16-inch rims rather than the current 18-inch rims. But it seems that Pirelli has actually pushed back on that idea. They've been quite open in explaining why. Basically, there is still going to be a shift, a little change. It's just going to be, they'll stay on 18-inch rims, but the tyres are going to be ever so slightly narrower. And Pirelli reckons it can achieve similar weight savings to the idea of moving everything to 16-inch rims by doing that. So it sounds pretty much like a win-win scenario, because I think Pirelli's concern was it would be a lot of upheaval at its factory, changing its production process, things like that. Now they've just got this new contract to be F1's sole tyre supplier. Is it going to be Pirelli's last? Would it want to make that investment? You can kind of sort of see the logic from their side, but equally there's no guarantees that going to 16 inches was going to achieve the desired results. So if they've got this projection that things can potentially be exactly the same by staying on 18 inches but making things narrower, which might sort of change the look of the cars more than anything else, then like I said, it sounds like a win-win thing. Don't think it changes anything for the teams really. They just got to deal with what they get, and that's sort of that is the real big sort of secret challenge of Formula 1, that is sort of a lot of teams still describe the tyres as like a pseudo-science, and slight changes in temperature or wind direction, things like that, it can really sort of make or break a weekend. So yeah, it's something that's definitely going to be slightly different coming in 2026, but not as dramatic as potentially it might have been.
Well, we will await more articles from you on that, Alex, I think, and see what happens with the tyres as the story develops. So before we wrap this video up, Australia Grand Prix, I'd like you not to predict your top two, because I think we know where it's going to go, but who's the outside chance and who's going to be the surprise package? Alex, start with you.
The surprise package, I mean, yeah, we've covered the sort of the more logical aspects of it. Okay, let's go for a chaotic race. Fernando Alonso gets on the podium. Why not?
I'm going to go that Sainz makes a brilliant recovery, builds on the form that he showed in Bahrain, capitalises on a bit of chaos. Red Bull finally make a strategy error, and Sainz come through and wins the race for Ferrari. Is that all right?
It's very all right, very bold.
Just on the science thing, let's not forget, do you remember here in 2022 when Ferrari, like I said, destroyed Red Bull? Sainz lost his best lap in qualifying because of the red flag coming out, and the next day in the race he spins off and it sort of totally changes the character of his weekend. He can be amazing here, so that's not that shocking a prediction, I think.
Oh, so what Alex has done there, John, is immediately trying to discredit you, isn't he? He's trying to discredit you and your bold prediction. You're saying it's not bold, unbelievable. You're saying it's not bold, though. You're saying it's believable. I'm going to go, Magnussen's going to get third. That's bold. Gents, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much. We shall have to see.
Let's see. What did they say?
Going to get third. That's bold.
You're
saying it's not you, isn't he? He's trying immediately.
A prediction, I think.
Oh, so what Alex has done there, John, is
and it sort of totally changes the character of his weekend. He can be his best lap in just on.
Is that right? On a bit of chaos, Red Bull finally make a strategy error, and Sainz come through and wins the race for Ferrari. Is that right?
It's
why not say Leclerc? Why this Carlos Sainz hype?
You're right, very bold.
Just on the science thing, let's not forget, do you remember here in 2022 when Ferrari, like I said, destroyed Red Bull? Sainz lost his best lap in qualifying because of the red flag coming out, and the next day in the race he spins off and it sort of totally changes the character of his weekend. He can be amazing here, so that's not that.
Oh, he can, but will he?
Oh,
no.
so what Alex has done there, John, is immediately trying to discredit you, isn't he? He's trying to discredit you and your bold prediction. You're saying it's not bold, unbelievable. You're saying it's not bold, though. You're saying it's a believable. I'm going to go, Magnussen's going to get third. That's bold. Gents, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much. We shall have to see what happens this weekend in Australia, but as always, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Well, there you go. Done and dusted for another race.
Okay, what do I think? Max should. Let's see. Yeah, probably Max win. Leclerc P2, Perez P3. Maybe, if we're really lucky, maybe Carlos Sainz P3. Or even better, Norris P3. Or even better than that, Piastri P3.
Race preview, Australia Grand Prix. Don't forget, it starts 2 hours earlier. It's an early one if you're anywhere UK or west of that as well. So set those alarm clocks, maybe get the teas made ready as well for an early start. We look forward to it. Don't forget to subscribe so you can catch up with all the Grand Prix action for 2024. And as always, thanks for watching.
5 at the morning, I think. Okay. That was that. Let's see. Yeah. Still some copion about Mercedes like always. And Mercedes will not be good. Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren will be in the top. Mercedes will be fighting Aston Martin. Ricciardo's first point for Visa Cash App RB. Oh, maybe even first point for both Visa Cash App RB, Formula 1 team and Williams. That could be a really nice hype. Autosport did their copion max move to Mercedes or something, and let's see here what F1 Nation have in mind, and it will probably be, I mean, Tom Clarkson or what's his name. This will be so much copium and brain that takes, but let's see. It could be not that.
It's race week again, Welcome everyone to F1 Nation ahead of this weekend's Australian Grand Prix with me, Tom Clarkson, and there's lots to talk about after a busy start to the season. And to help me do just that, I'm joined by Sky F1 presenter Natalie Pinkham and French journalist Fred Ferret from L'Equipe. A very warm welcome to you both. Should we start in Paris, perhaps? Fred, how are things?
Very good, thank you, Tom. Bonjour.
Bonjour. And Pinkle, all good?
From Paris to Brentford, and it's bonjour from me too.
We haven't had either of you on F1 Nation since the season's been up and running. So what did you make of the opening two races?
Well, I mean, I think there's been a bit of criticism that they weren't the most enthralling races. But for me, the subplots brought the drama. Ollie Behrman, the debut in Saudi.
Almost out-qualifying Lewis Hamilton and have 2 points less than Lewis Hamilton. That's a beautiful start.
I've just got this enduring image of him eating a banana in the garage, looking completely unflappable. I certainly wasn't that chilled out and confident aged 18. He was just phenomenal, wasn't he? You know, to step in at such short notice and to weave, like the eye of a needle, threading the eye of a needle, that Ferrari through the streets of Jeddah was just so impressive. But that's my big takeaway of the first two races, is Ollie Behrman's debut. I mean, just...
Marabou.
Är din borstning 100% effektiv? Eller inte? Oral-B's borsthuvuden ändrar färg när det är dags att byta. Borsta när det är grönt, byt när det är gult. Byt nu för 100% effektiv rengöring.
Such an exciting prospect.
The 1 hour before the start of the race, he was smiling at all of us, watching him taking his helmet on and things like that. He was so impressive, and I think we're going to talk about him for the next 10 years.
Fred, have you been surprised by the gap that Red Bull has managed to maintain over the winter?
I have to admit, yes, even if I have a lot of confidence in the French boss of the technology of Red Bull, which is Pierre Vacher, I thought that he may have made some mistake doing this very different car from the RB19, but they did it way better than the RB19, so the RB20 is massive.
You see, I'm hearing that actually the architecture of the car isn't that different. In layman's terms, it kind of looks it, because it certainly does look like a marked shift, doesn't it? But in fact, it is more of an evolution. Therefore, I'm not surprised. I am pleasantly, reassured that they're just doing what they've always done, and they won't stop. They won't sit back and relax.
And what do Mercedes do? Do they sit back, or are they actually trying to do anything?
And ever take it for granted.
They have been incredibly impressive, and for that reason, when you start thinking about the pecking order for this year, perhaps the likes of Toto Wolff were hoping that they would be destabilised. They haven't been, and it's very hard at this stage to see anyone beating Red Bull in the foreseeable future. One thing that I think is going to take all of our attention in the coming weeks and months is the 2025 driver market, and I think that's been accelerated by the presence of Ollie Behrman, 18-year-old Ollie Behrman, who stepped in for Carlos Sainz, of course, in Saudi Arabia, finished 7th. And while Carlos is expected to be back for Melbourne this weekend, after having his appendix removed on the Saturday of Saudi, it does raise the question, when are we going to see Behrman in Formula One again? Okay, he's got some FP1 running. I think he's got 6 FP1 sessions coming up with Haas during the year. But what about a full-time race seat? Guys, what do we think? There's 13 seats available in 2025. Where is Behrman? Let's throw the dice first of all and talk about Behrman. Is he going to be on the grid permanently next year?
Yes.
Of course.
You've just casually thrown in there that Carlos Sainz is going to come back and drive in Australia a week after major surgery. Can we just take a moment to say fair play to that?
Yeah, true.
Walking gingerly into the paddock. He's going, all right, Behrman, don't you get too comfortable. That's very impressive. I mean, these guys are superhuman, aren't they? But yes, I'm with...
Or they don't know what's really best for them, and I think they know, so they say yes when I should have maybe said no.
Fred, I mean, there's got to be a place for him on the grid. I guess the obvious one would be at Haas, because I believe he's very popular there anyway, and if they are the sort of sister team, if you like, to Ferrari to that extent, that would be using their partnership, if you like, in the most effective way.
I agree with Natalie. Haas was pleased with him.
And who will they remove? Is it Kevin Magnusson or Hulkenberg? I believe in Magnusson. I mean, he's washed.
The FP1 he did last year. And since his impressive demonstration of that weekend, being able to step on the Formula One, which is a Ferrari, and capable of driving, and even if he was not able to qualify in Q3, only 11, okay, his mistake, but then being able to finish 7th and taking care of Lando Norris and Lewis Hamilton, which from the Brits are very known to be quite a good drivers, I would say that his work was perfect.
Lies, they are
rookie.
bad drivers.
Fred, you know
Norris,
Fred Vasseur, the team principal of Ferrari, very well. He has given so much opportunity to young drivers over the years, be it in the junior formulas or now in Formula One. Do you think there's a little bit of Fred that's going, perhaps I underestimated Behrman. Maybe I should have thought more seriously about him for 2025 in a Ferrari?
Not a second. It's not being rude to Oli Behrman, not at all. When you have Lewis Hamilton, you don't think about anything else. So if you have Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, it's not being mistaken by forgetting Oli Behrman. Oli Behrman was always on the plan. And since the first problem of Carlos, Fred was aware that he may have to take Oli on that weekend in Saudi. He spoke to René Rosing since Friday morning. So it was not a way of... But I think it's the best for a young driver not to be put in so much light, I would say. Okay, we had that with Lewis Hamilton in 2007, but it was the old days, and we have to forget about the old days that Lewis Hamilton or even Max Verstappen used to drive for a Toro Rosso during 1 year. You have to learn things. So for Behrman...
So, I believe 100%. 1 or 2 years in Haas, and then when Lewis Hamilton finally leaves the sport or Ferrari, he will get to shine and be the true Brit to win races in Ferrari, or the only Brit that will be winning, because hopefully Lewis will not win anything.
The best thing is to go on a small team like us and then take care of the knowing things and learning things.
So Pinks, if he does end up at Haas, could you see Behrman replacing Hulkenberg or Magnussen?
So mean. My opinion doesn't count. I mean, I'm not just shirking, well I am, just shirking the question. They're both great drivers, they're both experienced. I suppose, look, based on current form on the first couple of races, it's Hulkenberg who's in the points, but that was, of course, an almighty team effort. Thanks to Kevin Magnussen.
No, it was the... Why is the McLaren... What do you call it? McLaren Gate? Spygate? I mean, isn't that a definition cheating and shouldn't be tolerated? Or should be tolerated? Spying and cheating.
Listen, so they're both proven entities, I suppose, within the sport. And yet, because of that, this would be the place to blood him, because it would be great to get a young driver in there of his caliber. And I feel like Kevin had a sort of second coming with the sport. I think he wouldn't feel as if he hadn't given it his all. You know, I'm not saying he's done in the sport because he's still young, especially compared to some of the others, but he's had a second crack, which he wasn't expecting. And I feel like he's very philosophical as well. You know, now he's a dad, knows that there's a world and a life outside of F1. So naturally, I guess you would say it would be Kevin. You know, some people are talking about it as early as this year, whether they would make space for him. I suppose that is the ruthless nature of Formula One. But, you know, we're 2 races in, for goodness sake. Let's just let everybody just bed in and settle down.
Remove him.
And prove what they can do.
Let's move it on to Red Bull then and talk about 2025. Okay, Max Verstappen, in theory, has a contract until the end of 2028. He was quite vocal in Saudi Arabia about his allegiance to Helmut Marko, and his future at Red Bull, I think, is going to be linked to what happens to Helmut Marko. But for the sake of this conversation, let's say Max is nailed on at Red Bull for a few more years. Who's it going to be in the second seat? Is Perez doing enough?
Perez is doing everything that's being asked of him. He's bringing it home cleanly in second, so you can't really fault him. I mean, what else is he supposed to do? I think that...
Silent ad time, Kit Kat, and we...
It feels like there has been a shift. Again, probably too soon to tell, but it feels like there's been a shift in his mindset as to how he approaches this season. I mean, if you remember back to last year, it was all out, I'm going for the championship. And of course, getting that win in Saudi last year really gave him the shot in the arm that he needed, that this was possible. You know, we know he's a street circuit specialist, and suddenly think, hang on, game on here. Only to be put well and truly back in his box by Max. So if he comes back into it this year,
Max
with a
didn't let Sergio Perez have more fun time in the playground.
Sort of different mentality, he may well start driving better. He might just relax.
Taking the pressure off, yeah.
Taking the pressure off, because I think that's often been... I mean, look, he's tenacious, we know that, but I think sometimes he does make mistakes when the pressure's on. So right now, he is absolutely doing enough. But again, long season. We've still got 22 races to go.
Wait, what?
I have to say that you have to put Max in the equation. He may have to leave at one point. If he leaves Red Bull, then the things are very different.
Yeah, right.
And then I would say that Checo seat is kind of saved, because you need someone to have the legacy of the driving from the old cars. So this is something that you must add on your mind for 25 and the years later.
I would be absolutely amazed if Max left for 25. I can see potentially 26 with the engine change, and, you know, perhaps he knows something that we don't in terms of how far advanced Red Bull are in the development in that area. But it would be staggering to walk away from this rocket ship of a car in 25.
Natalie, did you bet in Christmas that Lewis would go to Ferrari in 25?
But we're talking about walking away.
Oh my god, like the copium. Why would... It's more likely for Hamilton to leave Mercedes to go to a better car, Ferrari, than Max leaving Red Bull to go to what? A worst shit car that are sometimes worse than an Aston Martin.
From a entirely dominant car. We're not talking about walking away from a Mercedes. We're talking about walking away from a Red Bull. So say he's got this year sewn up.
Oh my god. The Brit don't have any British bikes.
So that's his fourth. He's going to walk away from a potential fifth?
There's so much momentum, isn't there, at Red Bull now? You do feel that that there is a championship going begging for him in 25 if he stays. And let's not forget that Lewis Hamilton was being lured by Ferrari, I think twice during his dominating years at Mercedes, and he said no both times, because why would I want to leave? Because I'm winning everything in a Mercedes. It's only now that he's going because he's not winning anything and he wants to reinvigorate his career. But yeah, it would be an extraordinary turn of events.
Be ridiculous too.
Okay, so Pinks thinks he won't. Fred, do you think Max Verstappen will be in the Red Bull in 2025?
Yes.
I'm not that sure. Maybe Max, because of Jos, because of Helmut, because of everything, will have to leave. I would say that it's a possibility.
What an extraordinary...
Yeah, possibility, yeah. Like always.
...thought. And there's one driver who's licking his lips at the prospect of Max Verstappen leaving Red Bull for 25, and that is Fernando Alonso. Do we all agree? Fernando is sitting pretty. He's got those 2 world championships. He's got the speed still. He's got the desire. We've seen that. You know, where's he going to end up? Is he going to end up in a Mercedes replacing Lewis Hamilton? Is he going to end up in a Red Bull? Do you know what? Even if Max stays, I can still see Fernando knocking on the door at Milton Keynes saying, come on, give me a crack. They almost did a deal about 10 years ago, and it didn't happen for various reasons. So I could see him ending up in a Red Bull, irrespective of which driver stays.
What?
I did want to ask about Daniel Ricciardo. I would say it's going not quite according to plan at the moment. He's been out-qualified by Yuki Tsunoda in both of the races so far. And Yuki, I don't believe, is under serious consideration for the senior team next year. So where does it leave Daniel?
Retirement.
Fred, do you believe that?
If he is still on this way of driving like he did the last 2 races, I would say yes, because we thought that the new Toro Rosso, AlphaTauri, Racing Bulls, I don't know. I think that it should have been the car to be beaten, because it's the copy of the RB19 also. But the other made a huge progress, so it's still the RB19, but in the middle of the grid. And Yuki is performing better for the first 2 races. So now we're coming to Australia, we're coming to Suzuka. If Daniel is not performing better, it's going to be tough for him.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because Daniel reported some pretty tough challenges with the car in Saudi, and yet Helmut Marko was public in his pressure on Daniel. So yet again, so either there's a problem with the car, then presumably Helmut Marko knows about it, but has chosen to speak out publicly about Daniel. I think it's a sort of a blessing and a curse going into your home race, because with that comes a huge amount of pressure, a huge amount of demands on your time, particularly for someone like Daniel, who's sort of so well loved and wheeled out as the PR machine that he is. But that in turn takes away some of his focus from what's happening on track. Suzuka will be an interesting one for him. But look, he has the experience to bounce back from this. And hopefully the team have got on top of whatever those challenges are with the car in Jeddah. But, time will tell.
And what about Carlos Sainz? He's, done a great job in Bahrain to finish 3rd. Of course, he didn't race in Saudi. He surely is going to be on the phone to his old chums at Red Bull saying, how about me?
Maybe or maybe not, because he knows that if he comes back, he may have to meet once again Max Verstappen.
No.
You know how it ended in 15. Okay, they were young guns. The fathers were too powerful. I agree, and now they are grown-ups and they can deal with everything. But I'm pretty sure that Carlos is clever enough to know that it's impossible to beat Max on his team.
Because there was very little separating them, Fred, in qualifying when they were teammates at Toro Rosso. I think it was like over the course of the year, it was a 1/10 of a second or something. So he's got the speed, he's got the experience now, a couple of Grand Prix wins as well. But you think it's the fact that Red Bull Racing is built around Max that will put him off?
No, I think the car is not that easy to drive. And Natalie just pointed that the Toro Rosso this year is quite picky and difficult to drive, just like Checo said about the RB19 last year. But Max is an extraterrestrial. He can drive everything. He won't ever notice that.
Even a Mercedes. That's why he will leave Red Bull for Mercedes.
Change. He drives everything and he put it at the maximum and maybe over the limit. But for a normal driver, and I think Carlos knows that he may be a very good driver, he's not a superhuman, just like can be Lewis or Fernando. So he knows that if he comes on that car, he may be able to win races, but he won't be able to compete against Max. It's better to go on another thing.
Fred, so who are your predictions for Red Bull's driver lineup in 25? Give me 2 names.
I would bet on Liam Lawson and Checo Perez.
What? Did he really say for Red Bull and not with a cash-up RB Formula 1 team?
Driver lineup in 25. Give me 2 names.
I would bet on Liam Lawson and Checo Perez.
Ooh. Wow, Fred, hold.
Oh my god, so what? Is this really real life? He's betting on... Liam Lawson. That's a big leap. I don't believe for a second Liam Lawson of Paris. I mean, I never seen Ricciardo being good, but I would rather put Ricciardo in a second car than Liam Lawson. I just put Liam Lawson in Visa Cash Up RB. But that's even if Max will leave. And why would he? Because the only thing that people can talk about. Because Mercedes are so good at making cars.
The front page. Pinks, how about you?
The thing is, it is all about the dynamic, isn't it? I mean, I think Fred makes some brilliant points there, because I can see that, you know, you have to be strategic with this if you are second to Max. You know, frankly, that's what you will be if you join the team and he's still there. You've got to be strategic in terms of your career, because, you know, we've seen so many fall by the wayside who partnered him, and you shouldn't be lured by the attraction of going to what is clearly the quickest car at the moment if you're going to get crushed by Max Verstappen.
YouTube pays creators more than any other social media
Scam
platform. More than TikTok, more than Twitch, more than Twitter, more than Facebook, more than Instagram, more than Snapchat, and it's not even close. And if you're a small YouTuber who wants to take a small piece of this $250 billion pie, I suggest you download vidIQ. vidIQ is the world's #1 AI tool for YouTubers that helps with channel growth and optimization. vidIQ helps you track your video's performance, brainstorm ideas, generate content faster, identify trends, spy on competitors, and so much more. You can click the link in this ad to sign up for just $1 and start using vidIQ to grow your YouTube channel.
Hi.
I'll wait.
You will wait? Nice.
So you just click the link on this ad.
You said you will wait, so I don't care.
Get vidIQ, all that great stuff. Start getting more views. Just $1. Okay, this is incredibly boring. Just click the link somewhere around this ad.
No, I will not.
Get vidIQ for just $1.
You will have to wait. Because you're so boring.
Försäkringar? Jag har sparat massa pengar på att inte ha det. Det händer ju aldrig något ändå.
I believe Max will be there, but, you know, stranger things have happened. And
like
if
what?
he is still there, then I could see them putting in a young, inexperienced driver alongside him.
What is more stranger than Max leaving Red Bull? Lewis Hamilton leaving for... That's not strange. Come on. That's just... Why would he not do that? So explain. What is so... Oh shit. Too far down. But they will never tell. Oh shit.
I mean, look, TC, you know I'd love Daniel to be back in the Red Bull. And I actually think he's at a stage in his career where he can absolutely handle it.
Damn it.
Ironically, I think Daniel Ricciardo could put a better performance in at Red Bull than he even is now at RB, because I think he knows that car and it suits him, and, you know, he's proven himself in there. I think these years out in the wilderness have been strange for him, but, you know, form is temporary, talent is permanent and all that. Why wouldn't you want to close out your career at the best team? And he's made no secret of that. That's what he wants to do. And I'm sure there's people that would want him, but again, you know, it's not a given. As we've seen the first two races, you've got to earn it and prove it. But I do think he would be a good fit for Max, because I just think he's mature, experienced. He wouldn't be fazed by Max in the same way, and he'd be very much prepared to play the team game.
Can I ask you something? When Daniel moved from Red Bull to Renault, it took him some time to deliver. When he moved from Renault to McLaren, he never delivered, even if he won. And then when he moved from McLaren to Toro Rosso, AlphaTauri, Visa Cash Up, he's not as impressive as he was. I think he's getting old and he's not being able to come back on every car he has to drive.
Listen, I think looking at the race results, you're right. But I think there are so many caveats. I think it's littered with caveats. I think that McLaren was a very difficult car to drive. Carlos Sainz said it himself. Lando has only ever known that McLaren. He's grown with the team. He's very smart staying with McLaren. He did perform at Renault. He outperformed the car, arguably. And then he broke his hand at Zandvoort. I mean, that was a horrible setback for him. And actually, it looked as if he was going to be able to do something in that car towards the latter half of the season. But look, obviously I'm a big fan of his. I'm a big supporter of his. But I recognise, you know, I'm not stupid. I recognise that you've got to put the work in, get the results. And it's a results-driven game. But I still believe he can do that.
I hope so, because I love him too.
Well, I'm going to be boring and say I think the Red Bull lineup will be unchanged for 2025.
True.
I think Max will stay. I think the competitive juices will get to him and he'll just say, I'm not going to give up.
Oh my god, Tom Clarkson actually knows his stuff. Hype.
Be a 5th world championship, so he will stay. And I think Checo is come into this season with a new mindset and is getting the job done.
Tom, if Max leaves, it's gonna be...
Oh my god, this Scorpion, he will not leave. Why would he? Please stop with the Scorpion. He's super annoying.
Fernando, 100%. With Checo or Lawson.
You mentioned Lando Norris. Do we think he's going to regret having re-signed for McLaren as early as he has, with the 13 seats up for grabs, you know, one at Mercedes and one at Red Bull? Do you think he jumped too soon?
I don't think so. I think it's a really smart move because I think McLaren are going in the right direction and they're continuing to do so. I mean, you played down their chances before the start of the season, and I think they've been... I mean, I know that they're lacking pace in a straight line. I know that he was frustrated in Saudi, so obviously the Jeddah circuit highlighted their weaknesses. But I just think there's something so important about being loyal to a team and sticking with the team and moulding that team around you. I think Lando's being clever in that respect. I'd love to see him in the Red Bull. That would be great. Great to see him perform alongside Max. But everything's a risk, isn't it? As Fred's just flagged up with Daniel's career, you know, you make the wrong move at the wrong time in your career and it can change everything. It's not to say that it's terminal in the case of your career and how you're remembered, but I think it's smart.
Do you think the dynamic within McLaren is going to change this year with Oscar Piastri, year 2, got his feet under the table? I thought he was incredibly impressive in Saudi. You know, you say being loyal to a team, which Lando clearly has, and moulding the team around you. I just wonder whether Oscar's thinking exactly the same thing.
That's the best for McLaren, having 2 great drivers pushing each other. That's the best when you want to grow and become one of the first 3 top teams. So you have to deal with 2 wolves.
And Andrea Stella, the team principal at McLaren, is a guy who I think will deal with 2 wolves, as you say, Fred. Well, I think he gets the sport. He's worked with Michael Schumacher in the past and Fernando Alonso, and I think he'll keep a lid on the politics inside McLaren.
I totally agree about Oscar. I mean, last year he was brilliant as a rookie, but there were just a few mistakes, and he was just laser focused on ironing them out. And I feel like this year his shoulders are back. He feels like he's grown a couple of inches. He's confident in a way he wasn't before. I don't know whether that's just innate in him or just great mentorship from Mark Webber. He just seems quietly more confident now than he ever has.
Well, his Achilles heel last year was race management, and particularly managing the tyres. And we've had 2 races this year so far, and there's a marked shift in the right direction in terms of his race management. So he is making ground where he needs to make ground. So it'll be fascinating to watch the intra-team dynamic at McLaren, particularly if they're able to outdevelop some of their rivals.
More interesting, Lewis Hamilton versus Russell. Russell is cleaning Hamilton up. He's so washed.
As we get into the the meat of the season. But guys, what about Mercedes? We know that George...
Yeah, true. What about Mercedes? Russell is crushing Hamilton. Hamilton is so washed. He need to... I mean, he's so wet. He need to go outside and get some fresh air.
Russell is going to be there next year. He signed that 2-year deal midway through last year. Who is going to be alongside him in 25?
I'm hoping for Mick Schumacher. I really want Mick Schumacher back in Formula 1. Vesti, I really don't care so much, but if they don't pick Mick Schumacher, Vesti could be a good deal. Antonelli, I hardly believe.
Toto Wolff talks endlessly about Andrea Kimi Antonelli, who is racing in Formula 2 alongside Ollie Behrman this year in the Prema team. Is he going to be ready to step up alongside George Russell at Mercedes in 25?
But he will maybe take the seat from Sargent.
Toto's talked about Max Verstappen and how much he'd love to have him there. Alonso has no doubt been on the telephone.
Or not this year. Maybe next year.
As well.
Not next year. The year... let's see. 2026.
Ocon has a contract, a management contract with Mercedes. Carlos Sainz has probably no doubt been on the telephone as well. He's looking for a drive. Where's your money?
I think that much depends on how Russell performs this year, because I think if Russell grows into the natural team leader, then they will be happy to bring on a young, inexperienced driver under him, like Antonelli. I think if Russell falters, as we saw in Singapore, and little mistakes creep in, which I don't think they will, but if they do, then I think they will be more inclined to go.
That was so beautiful. Norris made Russell drive too close to the wall and then just crash out.
Well, you
So
know,
beautiful.
Fernando, potentially. I mean, I'd love to see Max there, but no, I've already said Max is staying at Red Bull. Our listeners won't be able to see this, but Fred has just got the most gorgeous wry smile on his face through all of this. I sense, Fred, that you really just enjoy, almost like a fantasy league, with your football players just moving them around from team to team and getting the best combo, don't you?
Yeah, I love that. And I would say that whatever it happens for next year, I wouldn't bet on Antonelli to Mercedes for...
Man, no, not a washed opinion. Man, that's nice.
25. Just like I said before, it's better for Behrman, it's better to make a younger learns away from the pressure. Even if Kimi Antonelli is said to be the next Messiah. But remember, we only have one Lewis Hamilton or one Max Verstappen or one Fernando Alonso every 10 or 15 years. So don't put pressure on these guys for that. And even Max learned in a small team. I would bet on one last year for Fernando Alonso or 1 year for Esteban and see what happens.
Go on, so give me two names at Mercedes. Well, we know one of them. Who is going to be George Russell's teammate next year, Fred?
Vad får man säga på sociala medier och inte? Det tar jag reda på i dagens avsnitt av Vem ska jag tro på?
Go away.
Ocon or Alonso. Because he is part of the managing of Mercedes, so he can accept to sign only 1 year. And then in 26, you can put Antonelli back in Mercedes, and he has learned in Williams or whatever.
Luca De Meo at Alpine will no doubt be hoping that Esteban Ocon stays at his team next year. Do you think both Ocon and Gasly are looking for a way out, given the way the year has started for them?
2 months ago, I would...
Will they... I mean, maybe, but where should they go?
I've said no. We all know that next year's car will be the same as this year's car, so you can already know who's going to finish first and who's going to finish last. And especially with all these people leaving Alpine, which is a nightmare for me as a French, you can't see the team being able to be back on the track at a nice position before 26 at most. It will take years to come back.
With your L'Equipe hat on, how are you reporting the Alpine story this year? How much loyalty is there in the French media towards the national team?
We are not loyal. We are just journalists. So at one point we decided that it's not worth going on report every weekend to say that they are lost. If they are not getting better, okay, we did a small story about Esteban because the driver Esteban last week in Jeddah was great. Okay, he was only 13, but he has the worst car on the grid and he managed to be 13. Okay, it's not good, but for that kind of experimentation, it's great for him. He did a very nice drive, but we can't say more about that. And then we're going to have to cope with that unless there is big rain in Melbourne or a big crash in Suzuka and Pierre or Esteban take the chance to the opportunity to make a result.
I could see Alpine in 25 being a great opportunity for some young drivers. Jack Doohan, for example, their reserve driver this year. I think there's surely a great opportunity.
I would bet more on Victor Martins if he performs on F2.
Maybe Jack and Victor, or is it either or?
It would be stupid to get rid of all the two drivers. For my two French drivers, it's going to be a nightmare because they can't show their skill this year. To find the opportunity to get away, it's going to be difficult for the two of them because we all know that they are very good drivers. They won Grand Prix, one each. They made podiums, so they're good. They're even very good, but they won't be able to show their skills this year. So you need to take one at least, and maybe the two, but to have the experience at the team which has to be rebuilt.
Yeah, I mean, Fred's spot on there because how can your stock rise if you can't prove your worth in a car? And there was a time when we talk about Ocon of being the star of the future. You know, he was so highly thought of by Toto Wolff, for example, and then he just...
Yeah, and then when Toto Wolff finally just could get rid of him, then everything just changed. Wonder why. Was it because Ocon was maybe never that good?
He obviously had that sabbatical and it feels as if he's just like disappeared off people's radars. He still puts a smile on in the pen every time we speak to him. But it must be incredibly hard. And Gasly as well, you know. His stock was incredibly high at one point when at AlphaTauri and we thought he's going on to great things and it must be immensely frustrating. I do have to take issue with you though, Fred. Some journalists are loyal. You do have a heart. Just look for it. Search for it. It's in there somewhere.
You raise the topic of Toto Wolff and Esteban Ocon, and Toto is so ruthless. And if he thought Esteban Ocon was, you know, the next great driver in Formula One, there's no doubt in my mind that he would have put him alongside Lewis Hamilton. So the fact that Ocon didn't get the drive at Mercedes, I don't think is
true.
It's not a vote of confidence from Toto, and I just wonder where it'll leave him going forward.
It was hard for Ocon when he was up against George. I mean, it feels like a century ago now, but remember Spa in the Williams, and it was just a matter of time before he was promoted to the Mercedes seat.
I agree with Natalie, and remember that the one who was doing all the job in the 19 simulator of Mercedes was Esteban. The day that
he got used,
Lewis was
almost like Albon and Liam Lawson.
Sick. It was in Germany, 19, and Esteban flew at 2 o'clock in the morning to be ready to get the Lewis seat. And it's because Lewis said, okay, I will deal with that and I'm going to qualify. And he was very sick, but they all believed in Esteban. And there is only 2 seats, so Toto had to deal with George Russell and Esteban Ocon. He chose George, but it was not, I would say, a vote against Esteban. It was a vote for George.
Okay, that's a fair point. And let's talk about a Mercedes power unit now that's in the back of the Aston Martin. Does that mean Aston is a potential home for Ocon, given his links with Mercedes?
No.
I would more bet on Carlos to go there. If Fernando goes to Red Bull.
Aston Martin have grown so much in the last 18 months. And actually later this year, their wind tunnel is coming on stream, isn't it? So they are now a big team, ready to get podiums and wins. And, you know, we talk about, Fernando's going to go to Mercedes. Fernando's going to go to Red Bull. But hang on a minute. Would he actually be better off staying at Aston Martin, given the trajectory of that team?
I mean, he'll be the one that knows the most. He's on the inside. He'll know if they are going in the right direction for him. I mean, to leave Aston for Mercedes, I would say would be a gamble for Fernando. He's not guaranteed to do better at Mercedes than to stick around at Aston. And he hasn't always made the best decisions with his moves, has he, throughout his F1 career?
That is true. So you think for Alonso, it's Red Bull or Aston?
I think so.
Or Mercedes.
Well, but as Pink...
Also, this Scorpion, Max will go to Mercedes, Alonso will go to Mercedes, everyone will go to Mercedes. But or the worst one, almost, in the top teams. So, man, this Scorpion...
says, Fred, it's more of a risk. Are Mercedes really going to be more competitive than Aston Martin next year?
No.
Of course, they have the same engine.
Of course, that's why they're so bad.
If you move, you will always take the team that has the engine.
Okay, and when it comes to the fourth year and they're still bad, can we change that definition?
Building the engine. At Mercedes, the problem is not the engine. I think at the end, they will cope with the chassis. At the end, I hope so.
So, Fred, if you were Fernando Alonso and the opportunity was there to join George Russell at Mercedes, you would sign that contract rather than stay at Aston Martin?
My name is Fernando Alonso. I moved 6 times in 20 years, so I can move a 7th time.
And I'm going to drive till I'm 50 anyway, so...
Yes, I've got loads of time. Loads of time. Now, look, last team I wanted to discuss with you guys was Williams. Now, Alex Albon has a contract until the end of 2025, but he did say on this week's Beyond the Grid podcast, that he's very excited about the potential opportunities for 25, suggesting that he is actually looking elsewhere. I mean, we've discussed the teams where someone like Alex Albon would want to go. Could he return to Red Bull? Could he jump to Mercedes? Could he even go to Aston Martin? Or does he stay at Williams and remain integral to James Vowles' project?
So are we going crazy? Remember that in Red Bull, the big boss is Thai. And Alex Albon is driving for Thailand. So it wouldn't be stupid to have a Thai driver alongside Max Verstappen or whoever will be driving in 25.
Yeah, he has personal sponsorship from the Thai owner of Red Bull still to this day. That's an interesting dilemma for him, isn't it? But what about Williams? Do we feel Williams are still quite far away? It's very tight in the midfield this year, isn't it? You know, a couple of tenths here or there are the difference between a really solid Q3 and being knocked out of Q1, quite frankly. I suppose if you're Alex, you have to look forward, and if a Red Bull opportunity came up, even an Aston Martin or a Mercedes, I think you'd have to look at it, wouldn't you?
But you also have to be patient. You know that Williams is rebuilding itself. Since James' arrival, the speech of James Vowles is saying that because they have to rebuild everything, it's an old and historical team, but you need to rethink about everything. And he already said last year that maybe this year they would go back because they needed to work on everything, just like the steering wheel, which had problems at the first 2 Grand Prix. Okay, they had problems with the pit stop. Okay, but they relearned everything. I think at the end of the year, they will be a much more competitive team than they were, let's say, 5 years ago when it was about Felipe Massa and Valtteri Bottas. I think in 2 years, James Vowles would have made the job. And, okay.
Too high.
Kampen för låga priser fortsätter. NetOnNet. Titta på det här. Vilken uppvisning!
Jag vet inte om hon egentligen kan fatta det själv vad hon har gjort för någonting.
Skip it.
If you have to go to Red Bull for Alex Albon, he has to go. But if not, he should stay because he's the core of the project.
It's interesting because I don't really associate the word patience with F1 drivers. It's funny though, isn't it? Because you're right, James Vowles has certainly marked out a very long-term project here. Alex, I feel like he's going to be chomping at the bit to get into more competitive machinery sooner than Williams' trajectory will allow. But I think it's going to take too long. For the sake of his career, he needs to be selfish about that because it is a short shelf life to be a driver.
You have to be loyal, Natalie.
and he's turning 28 at the end of this month. He's got 80-odd Grand Prix under his belt.
He's a grandpa. He should just leave Formula 1. It's too old.
I would say he's hitting the peak of his powers now. So if he's going to make the jump to a Red Bull. But what's really interesting is that what we've kind of concluded, I think, when we're looking at our 25 grid, is that for most drivers, you'd say yes to Red Bull, otherwise stick where you are and build what you already have, whether you're an Alonso at Aston Martin and Alex Albon at Williams, or if Lando Norris is obviously signed up at McLaren, but he doesn't want to move either.
Agreed.
One quick thing before we move on is there's Haas, there's Sauber, there's RB, all of those drives.
Wait, did he say Sauber?
Thing before we move on is there's Haas, there's Sauber, there's RB.
It's Sauber, Formula 1 teams kick. No. Stake Formula 1 team kick Sauber and Visa Cash App RB Formula 1 team.
All of those drives are up for grabs. We haven't discussed, in the context of Carlos Sainz, Sauber. You know, it's just been announced just last week that Audi are going to purchase all of the shares from Finn Rausing, and they're going to do it sooner rather than later so they can start properly building the Audi project in...
And maybe remove the bad stay kick sponsor.
Inville. How tasty is that for a Carlos Sainz? Or again, is it the Williams problem in that it's not going to happen fast enough?
I would say first it's going to happen fast enough. Carlos is more mature than Alex Albon. He already won races, so he needs a car where he can deliver at once. I think Audi is going to take time, and especially if Audi wants a German driver and a young driver. So Carlos is Spanish, and he's not young enough to be fitted in that seat, so I wouldn't bet on him for the Sauber project.
You make a compelling argument, Monsieur Ferret.
We have asked our listeners to send in any questions that they have. The email address, if you want to do so, is f1nation@f1.com. And Eva got in touch after our Saudi Arabian Grand Prix review. She says, when selecting a driver of the day, the panellists often gloss over Max Verstappen. And I wonder why that is. When was the last time he put a wheel wrong in any situation? He's winning every race with a big gap, despite his teammates showing the field is close. So it isn't just the car that puts Verstappen so far ahead. Do you think the pundits take the extraordinary skills of Verstappen for granted and as such don't appreciate the level of perfection that we're seeing him deliver? What do we think? Do we take Max for granted?
No, yes. Not at all. I write every weekend on L'Equipe. He's the best driver on the grid and he's doing a perfect job. And then I move on because I need something to write for my readers. But he's the best. He made, I think, 5 times, I don't remember, 5 or 6 times, the best lap during the whole Grand Prix. Then he was skipped away by Charles at the end, but he was always, I think, 5 tenths faster than Checo during the whole race without any pressure for him, just for fun and with no mistake.
Our French correspondent does not take Max Verstappen for granted. Pinks?
None of us do. I think what we do, though, is we look, as we discussed earlier, for other subplots, for other storylines, to give others the credit and kudos that they deserve. It's a given that Max, by winning the race, has done so with incredible talent and guile. So I think if there was a championship point for driver of the day, then we might feel more compelled to give it to Max. But because there's not, and it's just a nice little talking point between us and, a nice little honour to bestow on someone other than Max. That's why we do it.
I agree with you completely. And Eva, I hope that answers your question. And please do get in touch, everybody. F1nation@f1.com.
Thank you. I will not. Is it time for some ads?
All right, my friends, it is now time to test your knowledge of the Australian Grand Prix in Quiz the Nation. And we've got 4 rounds, qualifying, sprint, race, and the podium. And if the scores are even after those, then we do have a tiebreaker in place so we can crown a champion. Are you ready to go?
Ready for the race.
We are ready.
Well, let's get started with the qualifying round. You'll each face one quick-fire question worth 1 point. Question 1, Fred. Who has the most pole positions at the Australian Grand Prix?
Michael Schumacher.
That is not a good start, Fred Ferry. It is Lewis Hamilton with 8. Natalie, coming to you. How many red flags were there at the 2023 Australian Grand Prix?
3.
I've got the answer.
Oh! I know that there were 8 DNFs. How many red flags? Were there 3?
Correct, Pinks. There were 3. So it is 1-0 to Natalie. Now it's time for the sprint round, and this game is sudden death. I want you to name the 22 drivers who have won the Australian Grand Prix since its debut in Adelaide in 1985. Each of you will take it in turns to name a driver, and if you give an incorrect answer, repeat one that's already been given, or you just fail to provide one, then you're out of the round. And the last person standing wins a point. So, Natalie, we will start with you. Let's name the 22 drivers who have won the Australian Grand Prix.
22.
Schumacher.
Correct.
Hamilton.
Correct.
Sebastian Vettel.
Okay. Well, I remember Rosberg winning it.
Correct. Fred.
Hakkinen.
Correct.
Stop being so quick! Stressing me out. Kimi?
Correct. Fred?
Coulthard.
Correct.
Very good. Oh my god, Damon. Damon.
1996. Very good. And 95, I think. Yeah. Fred?
Alonso.
Correct. Oh, right. I would say the easy pickings have been taken. It's now getting harder. Natalie?
Senna. Surely Senna's won it.
Correct. Fred?
Fisichella.
Very good. That's a good one. Nats, back to you.
Oh my god, he's going to kill me that I didn't say this sooner. Jensen.
Correct. 2009. Fred?
Prost.
Correct.
God, Fred.
Fred's looking at the ceiling. Natalie's looking at the floor. Come on, Pinkle.
Max must have won it. Have we said Max?
He won it last year. Well done. Correct. Fred, back to you.
Bottas.
Correct. Yes.
Oh my god. You're so quick at this. Right, hang on. Are there any more from this current grid, TC?
Yes. You've got 8 to get.
Right, how many more from the current grid?
Maybe.
1.
Oh, God.
Come on, there's some big names there.
Have we said Vettel?
Correct. Fred, back at you.
I'm gonna try Nigel Mansell.
Correct. Back at you, Pinks.
One more from the grid. One more from the grid.
Why this fucking music?
It's like a penalty shootout. Come on, Pinks.
I feel like they're trying to make it scary. Scamad! Hi, and it's the toilet one. From somewhere. Yeah, why? I mean, sure you want to show people touching the thing, but either they have already shown that or that we show it. People touching after they've used it. It's like, no, don't do that. Yeah. Using in the toilet and then now let's touch it. No, you don't. What are you thinking?
You said Fernando.
We have said Fernando, yes.
She lost.
Fred, we're gonna continue. I don't think that was her final answer, so.
It was my final answer. That's my fault. I think Fred deserves this one.
Okay, Pinks is out. Fred, you need to give me another correct answer to get this point. You need to give me another correct answer. Where are you going?
Nelson Piquet.
Correct! Fred, you have the point. It's 1-1. This is a seriously competitive quiz. People at home who are saying, who else? 2 years ago, Charles Leclerc.
Oh, of course. Oh, my God.
Eddie Irvine, back in 1999. Gerhard Berger has won it. Thierry Boutsen has won it. And Keke Rosberg has won it. Right, let's move on to the race. And this is where we're going to introduce some audio. So this round is what happened next. You're each going to hear some commentary from previous Australian Grand Prix, and I want you to tell me what happened next to win a point. Fred, we'll start with you. What happened next at the 2014 race in Melbourne?
Roars of appreciation for Rosberg. They are going to be drowned out, though, by this young man from Perth. It's Daniel Ricciardo for Australia, for Red Bull. Comes home to take second place.
It's an easy one. He lost the podium because there is some fuel problem, and he was disqualified 2 hours after the end of the race.
Correct. There was an issue. He exceeded the maximum permitted fuel flow rate. But, gosh, we remember that one, don't we? The crowd went completely wild, didn't they? Well, look, Nats, what happened next at the 2018 Australian Grand Prix?
Kevin Magnussen has pitted, has come back out in 9th place. No, 11th place, just behind Valtteri Bottas.
Was this his debut with Haas and he got in the point? He did really well. He got like 5th or something. Was that 2019?
Give me a bit more. 2018 Australian Grand Prix.
Oh, was he promoted into the points? No?
No. Here's the answer.
Who's that going very, very slowly? That was Kevin Magnussen. And by the looks of it, Martin, would you think one of those wheels isn't attached properly?
Hang on, we got another problem.
Another one, surely not. Roman Grosjean's pulled over to the side of the track. What is happening down at Haas this afternoon?
Fred, this isn't for a point, but just tell me in Nats what you think happened.
That the two Haas didn't have the wheel rim properly fitted, and they both get not disqualified, but they had to retire.
They had to retire. You're absolutely right. Kevin Magnussen and Roman Grosjean were running 4th and 5th, respectively, on course for Haas's best ever finish. But they each had to retire on the lap following their pit.
And that will be the last time they have done anything. That will be the last time. Actually, being close to a best finish. They will never do that again. At least with Kevin Magnussen.
Stops having both been released with a loose wheel. Scores on the doors. Fred has 2. Natalie has 1. She won't be enjoying this, Fred. So let's move on now to the podium, the final round of this week's Quiz the Nation. Your task is to reveal which mystery Formula One guest I am. I'll give you 3 clues in total, one at a time. If you guess correctly after the first clue, you'll win 3 points. After the second clue, you'll receive 2 points. And after the final clue, just a single point. And once you think you know the answer, shout it out. So for 3 points, clue number 1. I can speak Japanese.
Takuma Sato.
Jensen Button.
Clue number 2. With no tumble dryer in my flat, I once used the oven to dry my clothes.
Sounds like Yuki.
Nigel Mansell.
For clarity, this person didn't actually put his clothes in the oven. He just turned it on, opened the door, and placed the error in front of it. Clue number 3, this is just for 1 point. I am the first driver to win the 3 championships directly below Formula 1 consecutively.
Oscar Piastri.
She's done it, which means, Fred, it is 2-2, and we're going to go to the tiebreaker.
Oh
so
my God.
For this, you
Fuck
both
me, this
need
music.
a bit of paper and a pen, because you're going to have to write down a number. And I don't want you to be influenced by the other person. So I'm going to read out the question. You're going to write down your answer. The nearest to the answer will win the quiz. It's as simple as that. Here we go. How many pit stops were there in total at last year's Australian Grand Prix? Okay, write down your answer. Closest to the correct answer wins.
I'm going for it. It's a big one.
Fred, you're done?
Yeah.
Nats, you're done? Right, hold up your answers, please, to the screen. Natalie says 75 and Fred says 44, which means Fred is the winner. The answer was 53.
What did I want?
Just the honour.
A lot of honour and a pint from me in Melbourne. How about that?
That's perfect.
Honour, but also the fact you crushed me. It is a Gallic victory over the Brits.
So, with Fred being the winner of our Quiz the Nation about the Australian Grand Prix, let's bring it on to this weekend's race. How do we see it panning out? Fred, let's start with our winner. What do you think?
I won't say Max Verstappen because it's too easy. So I would bet on Charles Leclerc and with something happening with red flags and things like that.
Yeah, back to Eva's point earlier. You're taking him for granted, Fred.
No, I think he's feeling guilty because he didn't remember that Charles had won the Australian Grand Prix.
Fred, why do you think that?
Because I think Ferrari is not that far away from Red Bull, if it's Red Bull driven by Checo Perez, a normal driver. And then if something bad happened at Max, and it's quite a long time that he didn't have a DNF or something wrong going on his car, so I would bet on that. Then I would say that Charles and Ferrari are the best to take the win.
And Pirelli are going one step softer with the tyre compounds this year. It's the C3, C4 and C5, the softest 3. How do we think that'll shake things up? A few more pit stops maybe, but back to Red Bull, very kind on its tyres. I could see it helping Red Bull.
Yeah, but Ferrari had made a huge progress on that kind of thing, and they quite know how to manage tyres now. So
nothing about Mercedes.
This is not a problem, and in my bet, something's wrong's happening during the race. It's not a normal race, and maybe it's rain, maybe it's a huge crash, maybe it's Max DNF. So we are not related on tyre management, and everything's going smoothly.
Pinks, go on. What do you think is going to happen?
I think that, yeah, I mean, look, if last year's anything to go by, it'd be great, wouldn't it? If it was as drama-filled as it was this time last year.
Well, Pinks, let's throw it back to last year quickly, right? George Russell on the front row of the grid. He beats Max away at the start. Lewis Hamilton muscles past Max on lap 1. It was a Mercedes 1-2 in the early stages last year.
It will never
until
happen again.
Leclerc threw it off halfway round the opening lap. But can Mercedes challenge? Do we think this track might suit them? They've always been pretty good at Albert Park.
I mean, it would be great. It would be great for Mercedes and the championship if they could.
No. It would be good for Mercedes, but what do you mean for the championship? It would not. Ferrari and McLaren can do it.
I'm not so sure.
By themselves.
I think if we've learned anything about Red Bull this year is that when things get tougher, they step up another gear and they're able to deliver. I mean, I can't see past it being another Red Bull victory.
Red Bull 1-2?
I think Ferrari and Mercedes. Let's go Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes. You pick the drivers.
Why not McLaren then?
Fred, can we have a podium 1, 2, 3 from you?
Charles Leclerc, Checo Perez, and Lewis Hamilton.
Oh, he's mixing it up.
Like it. One thing I think we learnt in Saudi.
Why not say Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, and then we have Norris or Piastri?
was just how good the McLaren is through the fast corners, and since they changed the track in Albert Park a couple of years ago, it's now really fast. So I could see this playing to McLaren's strengths.
So what's
forget about last year with the McLaren early season; they were struggling massively. But I could see Lando and Oscar Piastri being competitive this weekend. I might even go for a Piastri podium. Piastri podium, Pinks. I'm going to go Max for the win, Charles Leclerc for second, and Oscar Piastri for third.
Wow. Can you imagine the party?
And let's hope it doesn't become a quiz question next year when we have to reflect on it being taken away for a fuel flow problem or something. But Pinks, while Fred and I are going to be on the ground in Melbourne, tell us about your week. Because you're going nocturnal, aren't you?
Yes, I'm quite excited actually because I won't be.
Scam out. Question mark. NFTs, yeah. Okay, this is scam. All of your crypto.
Going to Australia, but I will still.
Oh my
be
god, it's Formula 1 crypto. Oh my god. The scam
on the race. Back at base, so I will be going through the night. Let's see what happens.
Well, for people on the ground in Oz, qualifying starts at 4 p.m. in Melbourne, and the race is at 3 p.m. So that's 4 a.m. in the UK. And check the official Formula 1 website or app to find your local timings for each session wherever you're watching in the world. Let's check in with our F1 fantasy team now, F1 Nation Racing. We've got more than 300,000 teams in the F1 Nation World Championship 2024. That is a huge number. And it means our already slim chances of becoming fantasy champions are even slimmer. We're currently ranked 21,576th in the pecking order. And congratulations to our leader, Danny74, who's on a whopping 622 points after the opening 2 races. We might not have that many points, but at least we've been consistent with 208 in Bahrain and 203 in Jeddah. I'm going to use up all 3 of our free transfers for the Australian Grand Prix. I'm backing my podium prediction and replacing Fernando Alonso with the home favourite Oscar Piastri. I'm also, rather boldly, taking out Red Bull as one of our constructors and bringing in McLaren. And Zhou Guanyu has made way for Yuki Tsunoda. So that gives us a lineup of Verstappen, Piastri, Albon, Tsunoda and Magnussen, with McLaren and Williams as our constructors. And remember, F1 Fantasy is free to play. Just go to formula1.com/fantasy or search for fantasy on the official F1 app. Create your team and join the F1 Nation World Championship 2024 to compete against us and other listeners. And don't forget, you have until the start of qualifying in Melbourne to make any changes to your team for the Australian Grand Prix. Good luck. Well, guys, thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Nats. Thank you, Fred. Thank you to everybody at home for listening. And remember, if you have a question like Eva's and you want to ask our F1 Nation experts, please get in touch using the email f1nation@f1.com. And little plug, please check out this week's F1 Beyond the Grid with the Aussie home favourite Oscar Piastri. That'll be available on your pod feeds from Wednesday, and you can also watch our full chat from his driver room in Jeddah, no less, on Formula One's YouTube channel. But we'll be back next Monday from the Albert Park paddock with our review of the Australian Grand Prix, so do join us then. F1 Nation is produced by Formula One and Audio Boom Studios.
Yeah, oh my god. That French person that they had. Man, he had a lot of washed opinions. Everyone want to leave Mercedes. Oh no. Everyone want to join Mercedes for some reason. But nobody want to stay in their team. Yeah, sure. Let's see. We are mostly done with the walkway. The only left is something that I realized when I mined out this part. Is we have the mine shaft going into this place. So that I will maybe wait with removing. So that part will probably not be done tomorrow. But maybe I will fix so you can look down at least, like you can do here. Fix it up like it will be a mirror of what is over there, and then mirror the roof also. But we I went the long way, maybe. Yeah, long way. I can just fall down there. But let's see. Yeah, fixing up that more, and then maybe we'll go to that wall. And then after this, I'm like, this is 1/4. So this is the first corner, this is the second corner. Then we have a third, and then a fourth one after I mined out more. But yeah, for now, this will be where we'll still be doing or building. Let's see what will happen tomorrow. I don't know. We will see. Go away. Oh my god. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, tomorrow maybe the McLaren talk by the race. Then we see if anything new have come up. Mercedes will not be good. But until then, I would say